Hey there, welcome to the watering can. This week, your task is to have a look at the display name that's going out when you send an email and to have a look at your email signature. All right, so let's start with the first one, which is having a look at your display name. If you don't know what this is just what shows up in the from line when you send an email. So if you're not sure, go ahead and send an email from your business email address to either a personal account or to a friend who's willing to let you see it and just have a look. What does it say when in the from area? Hopefully, it says your name spelled correctly. If it doesn't, let's update it. There's actually a little bit more nuance to have a look. So the question that comes up a lot for in my circles is would you have your name there or do you want your business name there? My recommendation, especially for people who have a business where you're doing one-on-one work with people and the work is very personal, I would put your name there. If you put your business name there, it can be hard to remember who that business is associated with. It feels a little less personal. And really, what we want folks to be doing is developing a connection with you as an individual so that they feel interested in coming to work with you specifically. So, if it's important to you that your business is in there somehow, you can definitely put, for example, Camille Freeman and then a dash or a up and down line or a dot or whatever, and then your business name. Depending on the email client your recipient uses, it may or may not display a really long name. So you might just consider that. However, my recommendation and preference would be to use your personal name rather than your business name in your display name. Now, um, the other thing I want you to check while you're here is your display name in all caps or all lowercase? All caps, as you probably know, is often perceived as yelling at people. So, my recommendation is to not use all caps, but rather to capitalize the first letter of both of your names, your first and last name. Lowercase is a little bit of a stylistic choice, although it can be perceived as a little bit more casual. So, in a professional setting, I would say just go ahead and use regular capitalization. Another question that comes up sometimes is do you put your credentials in your display name? So for example, would it say Camille Freeman, LDN, RH, DCN, whatever other credentials you might have? Again, this is a stylistic preference, but my recommendation would be no, just use your name because there's an opportunity to put your credentials in your signature, and it's a little bit much to put them in the from line and it seems like quite a lot. However, if you really like them there and you feel like that's important, stick them in there. This is a personal choice, and my choice is to not put my credentials in my display name. Okay, if you are looking at this on Substack, I've included some links for how to check your display name in Gmail, Outlook, and Proton Mail. If you use a different mail service, you can just search to find out how you can update your display name in whatever service you use. So now let's talk about the second part of this, which is your email signature. This is very complicated because there's a lot you can do with your email signature. So I do recommend having one. And if you're not familiar with an email signature, this is something that you set up through your email client, such as Gmail, Outlook, Proton Mail, or whatever you use. And it will be automatically attached to all emails that you send from that account. So you don't have to type it in over and over and over again. So I do recommend that you have one. And the classic things that everybody probably should have in their email signature would be your name and your credentials, some kind of professional title or your business name, as well as at least one contact information option. All right, that's the bare minimum. So let's talk about those three, and then we'll talk about fancying it up a little bit if you want to. So your name and your credentials. Well, at least once a year, you want to double check this. If you have gotten married, gotten divorced, changed your name for any other reason, if you have added a new credential, if you have discontinued a credential, you just want to make sure that these are all up to date. You don't necessarily need to have all your credentials there, especially if it gets ridiculous. If you've got like 8 or 9 of them, I would say pick the most important, maybe 3, something along those lines. Again, if it's really important to you, it's a stylistic choice. You can also add your pronouns into your email signature if that's something that feels relevant for you to do as well. So just make sure that those are still correct and that sort of thing. For your professional title or business name, another that would go right underneath your name. And this would be something like herbalist and nutritionist or holistic health coach or whatever it is. You can also do it instead of your title, you can do a description about what you do. For example, herbal and nutrition support for people who are trying to conceive. So you could do something along those lines. That's a stylistic choice as well, but something so that people understand a little bit about what you do. And then right under that, one form of contact information. They already have your email address because you're emailing them. So you don't need to put your email address there. So I would recommend your website, your phone number, or maybe your office address, depending on what's relevant for you. You could do all three if you really wanted to. And if people regularly contact you through those, I just have my email, I'm sorry, my URL underneath that because that's primarily how I want people to interact with me. Okay, so those are the basics. Double check those at least once a year, which is what this little nudge is about. You can get fancy. So if you want to go beyond just the basics, your email signature is a really great place to promote some of what you've been doing lately. So, for example, if you have written a book recently, if you want to put in there about a workshop that you're doing, or a class you're teaching, or signing up for your newsletter, or anything else that's on your mind, this is a great place to do it because a lot of people see this. So, if you want to add some links underneath your basic information, my recommendation, the general kind of best practices, is to stick to 1 to 3 links, which you can rotate if needed. So if you teach a class every quarter, then you need to remind yourself every few months to go in there and update the class and the link and things like that. You can also put in there, a link to schedule an appointment, or we talked about your newsletter sign up, or whatever it is. So what you want to do is when you are adding these links, you want to use anchor text that describes what the link is. So it might say, for example, sign up for my newsletter, or, buy my book, or join my class on Firesider. And you would want to link the actual text. You don't want to put the actual URL in there written out like www.firesiderclass.com or whatever. Just link the text so that people are clear on what the link is going for. All right, so that's one option. Another option, and I've written a whole blog post about this, so I'm not going to describe it in great detail, but what I actually do in an effort to humanize email a little bit is I have a little section underneath my basic information, and it just says, here's what I'm up to in whatever month it is. So right now, when I'm recording this, it's June. It says, here's what I'm up to in June. And there's 4 bullet points. And I just say, if I'm going on a trip or teaching at a conference or starting a new class or working on a book or whatever it is, I usually write what books that I'm reading, maybe some recipes, whatever. I try to keep it interesting and really reflective of what's actually going on in my life. And I find that people really seem to enjoy that. People click on the links, they read it, they mention it to me, and it helps to personalize or humanize the process of emailing. So, again, you can get a little bit fancy. You don't want it to have you don't want a novel in your email signature, but try out some things and see what feels good, see what reflects your personality and the style of your business, and feel free to change it up a little bit. The last thing I want to mention is about the confidentiality text you'll see sometimes at the end of people's emails where it's like, this email is for its intended recipient, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of debate about whether that is necessary and whether it's legal. Not legal, of course it's legal to put whatever you want in your signature as long as you're not misleading people, but whether it's a legally binding thing. I've seen people come down on either side of this issue. I'll link to a couple of posts that go into some of the detail from a lawyer's perspective. But generally speaking, it seems like you can't enter into a contract with somebody by putting something in your email footer. So if it feels really important, if you've ever had issues before, if you're prone to accidentally sending emails to the wrong person, or if you do a lot of communication about health stuff through your email, maybe you would want to include that waiver or that confidentiality notice. However, for most of us, I think we probably don't need it, not the least because I don't recommend doing a lot of clinical work via email, and try to keep that in your EMR or whatever. Try to keep it separate from your email and try to do a really good job of not emailing the wrong person, and you'll probably be okay. That's my advice. Not a lawyer, not a professional in that particular way in any stretch of the imagination. So if you feel strongly about your confidentiality notice, you can keep it. Otherwise, in my opinion, it doesn't seem super relevant for a lot of us. All right, I hope that's helpful. This was a long explanation for something that's probably only going to take you a couple minutes. If you have any comments or you want to share anything about your signature or your display name, I would love to know about it. So feel free to leave a comment and I'll talk to you next week. All right, take care.